1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, welcome back everybody to Scuba Confidential. We're back again.
Yay.
Back again. So, again, I've lost count of the episode number. It's not really important. Episode 7.
Lucky number.
Louise has remembered as usual. I haven't as usual. So, with me as usual are Louise.
Hello.
And the King of Bungay.
Hello.
First of all, thank you to everyone who's listened up to this point. We hope you enjoyed the previous episode where
Thanks for listening.
Where you got to meet the bear and we got to tell a few stories about our diving gripes, what grinds our gears, and hopefully some of the stories that we told you found amusing and got something from.
Quite cathartic, wasn't it?
I felt much better for having recorded it anyway. So we hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed doing it. And we intend to have other guests on as we move forward with this. You can always contact us if you'd like us to discuss something. If you've got something on your mind, you can contact us via Twitter, the Facebook page, via email, scubaconfidential@gmail.com. Let us know, get in contact with us. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's on your mind, topics.
Any ideas?
Any ideas on anything generally for Ian.
Can be about scuba diving.
Then just let us know, because we always love to hear from you guys and hear what's been happening. Even if you just want to tell us your recent diving experiences and feedback to us, that's always something we're interested in.
Dive sites that you found good.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
So this one, by the time this goes out, is going to be kind of the Christmas episode. And just to let you people know who are listening, it's going to be kind of in 2 parts with a cunning edit in the middle. So it's going to be, to begin with, we're going to talk about some different subjects. We're going to talk about Christmas and how it's related to different scuba charities. We're also going to talk about things you might do when you're unable to get into the water, such as watch a diving movie. And then later on, possibly in part 2, we're going to have a very special guest on, a lady called Samantha Howlett, who is a fantastic marine research scientist who's going to tell us a lot about her work, what she's been up to, where she's been, so do stay tuned.
Interesting stuff.
I think there's some really interesting stuff we've got in this episode, and especially the next one. Sam is excellent, so do hang in there, do stay subscribed and listen for that. But before we go any further, I guess, what have we been up to? So Ian, what have you been up to?
Well, you guys don't know about this, but as this is our Christmas edition, I thought I'd bring a little something to play. As this is our little Christmas edition.
I don't quite know what's going on here.
You see, as it's our Christmas edition, I thought I'd just add that to the show. little tune.
So, for the purpose of those listening, obviously you can't see. Ian's brought in what looks like a Care Bear with a Christmas hat, playing a saxophone.
I knew you two would
and his
appreciate
cheeks are glowing as well.
It is, you see.
Rosy red.
Actually looks a bit like Marcus as well, don't you think?
It's uncanny.
Yeah. Slightly hairier, but
So there we go.
We'll cut that short. That's enough of that rubbish.
I think it's enough of that. On with the show, I think.
Yes. So last week I went to Eurotech 18 over in Birmingham, and that was really good. Really interesting. First time I've been to one Eurotech show. Went on the Saturday. It was a full out. A lot of people there. It was very busy. Met some really interesting people in the industry. Different people who, engineers who made their new types of equipment that are used in diving. I was listening. I went to a couple of the talks. There was one really good one, particularly I really enjoyed, and that was about a wreck, 2,000-year-old wreck off the coast of Malta. And they're going down, they're finding these pots, and these pots are still sealed, and they're finding all these things inside in this wreck. And although most of the wreck is gone, there's not, the wood is all disappeared, but they're down there about 110 metres, and that was really interesting.
Pretty deep,
hearing how they're actually excavating, and this complete archaeological site that they're found, and that's really interesting. So it was a really good day. Nice to meet new people, spread the word, tell them about what we're doing as a podcast as well. A little bit of networking, and sort of learning a little bit about the tech side of things as well. So that was a good day.
Sounds all very positive.
Yeah, it was.
And I think it's really eye-opening. I mean, technical diving is a completely different discipline to recreational diving, and we don't touch on it much so far in this podcast. I think eventually there will come a time when we'll start to go more into that area.
I think that'd be good.
And I think that'll be interesting when the time comes to go a bit further down that avenue. But that's all really good. Thanks, Ian.
Right.
For me, just so you know what I've been doing, recently I managed to get to the Oceans Film Festival, which was held at the UEA. This is a project where a team go around the UK. It's like a cinema evening, like an art house cinema evening, and they show between 6 to 8 short films based around different subjects regarding the ocean, whether it's conservation or free diving or surfing. Lots and lots of different things. One of them was even these two guys from Eastern Europe rowing a boat from Africa across the Atlantic to Brazil, which was horrific.
Were they naked for most of it as well?
No, they weren't naked. That's just your imagination. What happened was they'd kind of underestimated, bless them, how the effort and the kind of physical demands of the rowing and the journey, and they ended up developing.
It's not far, is it?
Well, it's not far. They ended up developing blisters on their backsides. So there are these really graphic scenes of these boils on their derrieres being burst. But not all of them. Like some of the films were really.
You've got to be really good mates for that.
Yeah, pretty close.
Pretty close to kind of do. Will you just burst a boil on my backside? That's a special kind of friendship. But the films themselves are interesting. It's a really good.
Pretty inspiring stuff.
Pretty inspiring stuff. A lot of it, particularly with the conservation. Some of it harrowing. I won't lie to you. Some of the movies were harrowing. Some were inspiring. But
there's one about plastic, wasn't there?
There were several about plastic and plastic pollution. For anyone who's interested, they've actually finished for 2018, but there's some dates coming out for spring 2019. So do keep your eyes peeled for that. You can go to oceanfilmfestival.co.uk if you're interested in seeing what's happening and what they're up to as we move into the new year and what's out there with regards to this film festival.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Would you burst my boil?
No, I certainly wouldn't. Not under any.
Leave the room.
Not under any circumstances.
It's not a great chat up line in. I'm not going to lie.
That's what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much it. I think we're gonna crack on this occasion and go straight to Lou with the news. What have you got, Lou?
Okay. So first up is an announcement from the Hurghada Environmental Protection and Conservation Association. It's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Otherwise known as HEPCA. Now, HEPCA are a conservation organisation that specialises in marine and land operations in the Egyptian Red Sea. And they issued an important announcement recently regarding the closure of the Brother Islands in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
So it's a really popular dive site. Some of our listeners may have actually dived there themselves. So it was basically announced that the Brother Island site would be closing due to an official request by the national parks. And basically the bottom line is it's because of the amount of safari boats that are operating in the areas. People aren't diving properly, they're not using good dive practices, they're interfering with the marine life, and it's had
a shame they've had to take this measure, really, isn't it?
It is. It's drastic, but I think it's testament as to how bad the situation is in particular dive sites around the world, that are frequented by a big volume of boat traffic in particular.
I can kind of relate to it, because when I was on the Thistlegorm this year, on that dive. There's just so many boats around there. I think that's like 8, 9 boats. And when we did the night dive, I can remember feeling sorry for the wildlife actually on and around that wreck, because there's just so many people on there at one time.
Relentless. Yeah.
There's fins going everywhere, being barged about, and I think this is how I feel. How does the wildlife feel about all this? Going on?
And that's just this. You're referring to the sheer volume of divers on one site at a particular time. But if people aren't, towing the line and interacting with nature as they should be, some people, like we were referring to in our last episode, hassling animals, not respecting the wildlife. It's a contributing factor, and at the end of the day, a dive site can only take so much, dive traffic, boat traffic, and interruptions to its natural kind of
think,
proceedings.
and I'm welcome to be corrected, because as you know, I'm a scuba idiot, as we all are, but I think I read in some of the reports they're even baiting in the water to try and attract pelagic life like oceanic whitetips in to facilitate tourism, to say, you'll definitely see a shark. And in fact, I think that the subject of baiting and interaction with wildlife, when we get to part 2 of this podcast, when we have Samantha on, that will become even more relevant, and she'll be able to give some more information on her experience of that, which I think will be really, really interesting. So that's a really good news item. Thanks for that, Lou.
Cool, no worries.
What else you got?
So, the second story is quite a sad one, really. 51 pilot whales have died after becoming stranded on a beach in the Chatham Islands off of New Zealand. So it's following on from a previous 50 whales that were found dead in Hanson Bay over in New Zealand, and so it brings the total of dead whales now to over 200. And it's just over the past couple of weeks. The reason for them appearing on the beach and actually dying in the first place, it could be for a number of reasons. So officials have suggested that it could be due to the whales making navigational errors, losing their way in bad weather conditions, or just escaping predators.
I just don't buy that. Whales making navigational errors.
They've been doing it for quite a long time,
navigational errors.
I've seen it.
And go the wrong way. I should have gone left, and I should have gone right. And
whales don't drive Mr. Navarro's, though, do they?
Whales know where they're going. Whales are.
You'd like to think so.
Well, he struggled to get to Bear Studios this morning, to be fair.
Well, you do, don't you? I just can't. I can't see it. I just don't buy that whales didn't know where they were going.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few schools of thought on this. There's some people, some scientists have said it's because of noise pollution, because of either extensive boat traffic where cargo ships are then interfering with their means of navigation, or, for example, in areas where there are things like wind farms. The vibrations from that, again, interfering with their natural navigation system. So the combination of those things, some people, and again, I'm just a scuba idiot, but some people have said that may be interfering with how these mammals navigate around. That may be something.
That sounds more feasible. It's something that man as a species has done something.
It's still early days with a lot of technology, isn't it? So we don't really know the full extent of how it impacts on the natural world. Officials have said that they're working closely with local communities to arrange for the handling of the whales, but skin and blubber samples are being taken away to labs for analysis.
Because don't they rely on the magnetic force?
From what I can gather anyway from news reports, is that I think they are trying to gather a bigger or better picture of why it's happening, and how it can be avoided, obviously, in the future.
Yeah. Such a shame to see.
It is heartbreaking. But as Lou rightly said, they need to gather data, they need to analyse it, and there's obviously lots of research has to go in before they get accurate data on and find some means of recommending a solution. Again,
it's taking a positive out of a horrible situation, but it's good that they are conducting research and they do want to get to the bottom of why it's happening, so then they can then act
and hopefully
prevent it in the future.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess they the news items for today. Thank you very much, Louise.
You're welcome.
It is the Christmas episode as the King of Bungie.
Should we have that?
No, please don't. Please. Once was enough. It is Christmas when this goes out, and a lot of people will be thinking about buying gifts and spending money on various bits and pieces. But when we sat around the other day at Scuba Confidential headquarters, we were thinking there is an alternative. If you've got money burning a hole in your pocket and you've got someone who has a conscience and is interested in the oceans, there are alternatives. So Lou has had a little look around at what scuba and ocean related charities there are that may be something you wish to contribute to.
Yeah, well, like you say, Marcus, it's an alternative gift. So we're looking at not just gifts for ourselves, but also gifts for friends and family. And sometimes membership to a charity is a great alternative to just another Boots beauty gift set or something, So basically, in no particular order, I've compiled the top 5, if you like. So first up is the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Charity, or the WDC. So these guys are a leading charity dedicated to the protection of whales and dolphins, believe it or not. And their work in recent years has contributed towards an end to the illegal export of whale meat from Iceland to Japan. And they've also helped to reduce consumption of whale meat in Iceland, both by local people in Iceland and tourists. More recently, the charity's focus has turned towards achieving culture change in Iceland and the Faroe Isles, aiming to change opinions and reduce consumption. So they do some fantastic work. You can support them via a one-off donation or a monthly regular donation. So you can find out more details.
I think the Faroe Islands were in the news just recently, weren't they, by hunting?
Yeah,
whales,
well, they do an annual drive, or grind, I think it's called, isn't it? So it's pilot whales. They pretty
it's fairly brutal.
Slaughter.
Yeah, it's fairly brutal.
It's horrific. Yeah.
I think their argument is it's part of their annual tradition, and obviously environmental groups have a slightly different view on that. Whether they can come to a compromise in the longer term, I don't know. I'm not enough of an expert on the subject.
It's just the barbaric nature of how they conduct it, really. Yeah. So. It's all very well saying, it's our tradition. Not that we want to kind of get involved as such with, airing our opinions at the moment, but it's pretty gory. If you want to find out more about the annual pilot whale grind, then there's more information on the WDC's website with regard to that. Members can donate, like I say, via one-off payment or monthly contribution. Members of the WDC receive a regular magazine, and that keeps you up to date with all the charity's work. So it's great that you can keep up to date with where your money's being spent, essentially.
Brilliant.
So that's the WDC. Next up is the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. So I think you're aware of their work, aren't you guys?
It amazed me. I think it might have been you when we were talking the other day, Louise, having a cup of tea, and you said you met someone who's like quite a experienced diver who hadn't heard of Sea Shepherd, and for me they were
they got a new boat, haven't they?
They're key in conservation. Tell us about them.
Really, yeah. So, like you say, they're pretty well known. They were quite famous a couple of years ago, or a bit longer actually, for the Whale Wars TV show. I think it was on National Geographic channel. So they're an international non-profit marine wildlife conservation organisation, and their mission is to end the destruction of habitat and slaughter of wildlife in the world's oceans, and their message is pretty clear: to conserve and protect ecosystems and species. The guys are known for using direct action tactics, shall we say?
Yeah.
They're completely they're non-violent. They don't they're very at the end of the day, they're very passionate about what they do, but they use tactics. For instance, their Operation Nemesis, so down in the Southern Ocean, to protect and defend illegal whaling conducted by Japanese boats. So they'd be throwing canisters of basically just stink bombs really. Overboard towards the boats. They'd be using prop fowlers and things like that to really try and impede the activities of the Japanese whalers. So they're really, really, really good charity. So they like to expose, confront and investigate illegal activities in the high seas. Also as well, they've been really, really played a pivotal role in raising awareness and trying to do something with regard to the Targhee Cove, the annual dolphin slaughter as well. If any of our listeners aren't aware of that, again, head to seashepherd.org website, and there's all information not just about that campaign, but also the other campaigns that they've led. There's various ongoing ones at the moment. And yeah, it'd be great to have one of the guys on this show actually to discuss about their
what they're doing.
campaigns.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Again, you can make one-off donations, you can join as a member, you can get involved as a volunteer. You know, they're always looking for volunteers to help out with the campaigns as well. So yeah, really worthy cause. Yeah. Sea Shepherd, I'm a big fan of them. They are, you know, an amazing organisation. Just as a little aside, as we're talking about movies a little bit on this particular episode of the podcast, if you haven't seen them already, watch the 2 films. One is Shark Water, where you can actually see Captain Paul Watson, who's one of the figureheads of Sea Shepherd, in action, dealing with illegal shark finning trade. And there's a second film called The Cove, which is about the slaughter of dolphins in Japan. Both of the films, I'm not going to say they're going to cheer you up, but they will be very informative and interesting to you if you're interested in Sea Shepherd and some of these conservation issues. Yeah, if you like to say, if you're passionate about your wildlife, you really need to be aware of these guys' work. Like you say, it's not enjoyable viewing, it's pretty harrowing stuff, but it really brings to the fore what a lot of our wildlife is up against, really. Great. And the other charity that we're really passionate about as a group is the Sharks Trust. So it's a UK-based charity, and they pride themselves on safeguarding the future of sharks through positive change, science, education, and action. So they're a founding member of the Shark Alliance, actually, which some of you may have heard of. And those guys advocate for the adoption of a European community plan of action for sharks. And that was back in 2009. And actually led to the strengthening of the European finning ban in 2013, which was a massive win for shark conservation. So they've done some fantastic work. And thanks to the work of these guys, the UK is actually now an internationally recognised champion of shark conservation.
That's good.
So it's due to their work that
very good.
The UK is now leading the way for that. So you can make a one-off donation. You can adopt a shark.
Sharks have had
Not
such
entirely
a bad
sure
press,
how that works. Exactly.
It's all been dramatised up.
Amazing. Sharks are amazing creatures, and they really do need to protect. Hundreds of millions of sharks are killed every year, which is just ridiculous. It's horrific. To play a part in protecting these amazing creatures, absolutely fantastic. So the Sharks Trust is great. Again, you can join as a member. You can adopt a shark. Not sure how that works. You can make a one-off donation, and junior shark fans under the age of 12 can also become members of the Pups Club, and they receive a welcome pack and a twice yearly magazine. So it's a really great way for getting youngsters involved, raising awareness of how what they can do to help protect these amazing creatures.
I think that's a really good thing, and that attitude change I think ties in with what we talked about in episode 2, where it's like a generational thing, and each generation becoming more aware of what steps need to be taken. It's
Education is key, isn't it?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
So our penultimate charity is the Marine Conservation Society. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard of these guys. Again, based in the UK, and they're looking to protect our seas, shores and wildlife. So they've been present for over 30 years. And again, like the other charities, they've led lots of groundbreaking research to highlight how the modern world impacts on marine life. It's led to various campaigns, such as a drive to help ban unflushable sanitary and toiletry products, and encourage businesses to ditch disposable plastic items, so single-use plastic. They're really, really trying to push that forward. So they're involved in a lot of campaigns. And again, you can become a member, an Ocean Guardian, as you're known as. You can make a one-off donation. You can do a monthly contribution. And again, they do a junior membership for £15 a year.
So are they predominantly just talking about UK waters, do you think?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, at the end of the day, the whole water system, it's not just what affects our shores. I mean, that is their focus ultimately. But they are involved in a lot of work around Europe, the rest of the world. If we all work together, we'll have that common interest, that common drive to make it a better planet. Don't sound like too sort of out there, like Michael Jackson, heal the world. But it's true.
He was on episode 2 as well.
There's a trend
let's not resurrect him at this stage.
Let's leave MJ there, shall we?
He can stay in the box with the cake.
But but yeah, you're quite right. You know, it's all working together, and we can at the end of the day, it's the whole planet's wildlife. It's not just our short line. It doesn't directly affect just us. And like I say again, £15 a year. Junior members are welcome. They get their own welcome pack and regular magazine as well. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Okay.
Last but not least is the Royal National Lifeboat Association, or the RNLI, and as probably the most famous charity that I've mentioned so far. So they provide 24-hour rescue service in the UK and Ireland to anybody in the water. If they're in difficulty, in trouble, they provide emergency assistance, and they save thousands of lives every year.
Invaluable.
As divers, hopefully we'll never need their help. Can
we say hello to the Cromer lifeboat? Because
you were up there the other day, weren't you?
Yeah, met them in April as well, so that was really good. And if any of them do happen to listen to this at some stage, hello.
Our local lifeboat station,
yeah, brilliant.
Isn't it?
I think they're all volunteers in the lifeboat organisation.
Yes, they've all got day jobs. They've got families and things going on in their lives, and they're taking that time out to
risking their own lives to help like this. Is amazing.
When they go out to sea, they're doing it on a volunteer basis.
Yeah, so it's totally selfless. It's amazing.
Amazing to do that.
And as well as saving thousands of lives, it's a really important part of their work is that they're doing community safety like liaison services. So they go out to schools, communities, to provide influence and supervision and education on how to stay safe in the water. So how to prevent drowning ultimately, and what people can do to take responsibility, especially during the summertime down at the beach. It's easy to get into a tricky situation. Well, exactly. And they work closely with lifeguards with regard to training and equipment and support. And you can donate by purchasing gifts directly from the website. So RLNLI.
Should we try again?
She sold seashells on the seashore. RNLI.org. There we go, I said it.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Or you can choose from a range of membership options, starting from just £2.70 a month.
Yeah, brilliant charity to highlight, I think.
Really good charity.
Yeah, I think there's some really good suggestions there. That's the conclusion of your list, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes.
Well, thanks very much for that. That was superb. So, if you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, if you've got a friend, a family member who's passionate about the oceans, ocean conservation, ocean safety, well worth investigating those charities. So, brilliant. Thanks again for that, Louise. It's that time of year, guys, when getting in the water, particularly if you're based in the UK, there may be some of you people out there who are in warmer climes, but for us, getting in the water here right now is not quite so enticing. You might prefer to be wrapped up on your sofa, perhaps with a glass of vino or two, by an open fire. And there's lots of, as we talked about earlier, there's lots of ocean-related movies. And at Christmas time, who doesn't like sitting down and watching a film
with a nice little tune playing?
Say again.
I think we'll leave that. We'll leave that there, shall we?
That's going to end up in a skip, I think.
It's going to be out in the edit. I can tell you that for nothing. There are several really excellent diving-related movies out there. Whether you're talking about The Abyss, The Deep, Big Blue, Into the Blue. But when we sat down and were speaking about what are the two biggest ocean-related movies, which are the ones that spring to mind when someone talks about diving, the oceans, scuba, and movies? What are the big two, the daddies? And we came up with what we thought were the two biggest diving-related movies. The first one is going to come from Mr. Ian.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, Marcus. I was looking at Thunderball, James Bond, one of the first James Bond films, filmed in 1965. Including Sean Connery as he plays the 007 MI6 James Bond, and he's pitted against the baddie as Spectre. Spectre's the bad organisation. Now the basis of the film is Spectre is going to steal by hijacking a Vulcan bomber. It's great to see the Vulcan bomber in a film. One of my favourite planes. And so they're going to steal one of the 2 atomic bombs, and they get out the Vulcan bomber. They take that over to Bahamas. They crash the Vulcan bomber into the sea, and the idea is that they're then going to scuba dive, get the bombs, and then they're going to hijack and hold the world to ransom for $100 million. It's all true.
Yeah,
Of course.
$100 million.
Yes. You can see where Mike Myers was starting to get his ideas.
Very much.
I actually thought 100 million, the world to ransom 100 million, but then 1965.
I was going to say, yeah.
It was a serious
Back then,
amount of money, even though
Yeah, it's about the
100
price of a
million
terraced house now, isn't it?
yeah, thereabouts.
in London, yeah.
So that's it was a really good film. I really enjoyed it. There's a few factors I quite enjoyed, and I sort of just want to pick out on the film because it's the usual good versus bad, type of film, and Sean Connery comes the winner at the end with a few ladies in the film as well. So it's,
scattered about.
yeah,
Like they do.
yeah, as you do. And one of the interesting points is that they one of the scenes was to blow up Disco Volante, which is Spectre's big boat they've got.
Disco Volante. It
Yes,
sounds
and
like
that-
some New York dive bar.
It's a great James Bond film, great James Bond name for a boat. And so when in the making of the film, experimental rocket fuel,
Okay, right.
and they load that up in the boat, and then they sit back, they wait for it to go off, they blow the boat up,
Right.
film cameras are all rolling, and it goes off bigger than what they're expecting.
Oh,
So
underestimated
big
then.
that takes that wind as 30 miles on the island, but
That's just
Bahamas,
careless, isn't
apparently.
it?
So imagine seeing that. That must have been awesome to see and to watch. And they're expecting just a little blow up, and the whole thing really goes up. So that must have been quite awesome.
What for you was like the best part of the movie?
So
would you say?
towards the end, there's this fight scene
Right.
underwater. Now there's 2 parts to this because one part of it was filmed in a swimming pool, and the other one was filmed where the fight scene is about 10 metres down off the coast of the Bahamas.
Oh wow. Okay.
I'll tell you about the swimming pool part. Sean Connery reportedly had a really close call where the part of the filming was done with sharks. One part of the pool was had the sharks in, and there's a clear perspex wall that
It's like a
separates
safety barrier. Yeah.
that separates Sean Connery from the sharks in the
Right.
filming, but they hadn't fixed the wall, the dividing wall.
Okay.
So one of the sharks somehow got round the wall, was after Sean Connery, and he had to basically get out of the water really quick because that was about to get him.
Wow.
So and that actually happened. So
Okay.
although there's reports apparently that Sean Connery just took in his stride, and
Of course
that's
he
absolutely
did.
fine.
Of course, he would,
Yeah.
wouldn't he?
Martini
wasn't
in
worried,
hand,
he wasn't worried
Shaken,
at
not
all.
stirred. Yeah.
So, but to go to the actual scuba diving part in the film as well, towards the end, it goes on for about 7-8 minutes of part this fight scene, and again you've got one group of on the good side, and another one on the bad, and Sean Connery's there and he's fighting them off and stuff like that. It's really good. You've got divers coming in with motorised units bringing them
Like
in.
the propulsion vehicles.
That's it,
Oh
yeah.
right, yeah.
You've got they're fighting with spear guns and all sorts.
It's all
of
kicking
stuff.
off then.
It's all kicking
Yeah.
off. Yeah, it's really good. But what was amazing was that they practiced this on above water on a barge, so they knew exactly. So it wasn't a case of just some random fights going on and while the cameras are rolling. That everything was choreographed.
Yeah, okay.
Got that word out.
Hey.
Choreographed.
Ian's word of the day.
I know. I've been practicing that all night.
Impressed.
So everything was all practiced, and they knew exactly what they were going to be doing. And everybody had their part to play. There was about 50 people doing this in this scene, and how they communicated was through hand signals. Yeah. So when the director was there watching, and he knew what people were doing, and you think this is all going on under the water.
Yeah.
They were using the people in charge, the directors and so, were basically communicating to the divers. You do this, you do that, with hand signals.
That's pretty cool.
So they had to know all this before they went
as
under.
actors, not professional divers as well.
Yeah. And apparently the filmer took forever because somebody, the cameras would be rolling and somebody wouldn't do what they're meant to be doing. They'd have to start it again. And you can imagine some of the hand gestures probably got more interesting as time went on.
I produced a few in a time.
So there's a classic piece in the film where I got a highlight and I was watching, and so Sean Connery, there he is. He's in the water. It's about 10 metres down. You can imagine that. And you can imagine it's 1965, so we're talking scuba diving, so, still in its early days of innovation and things like that.
Then, was it? Yeah.
No regulator in, of course, because James Bond don't need regulators, in
of course he don't.
He's just got a little tiny little gas bottle, in his mouth. So somebody fights him, pulls his mask off, and you think, he can't see. But he can see.
Oh no, James Bond's going to die!
But fear not. He grabs another mask off somebody else and carries on. You think, well, how did he just clear that?
Magic.
Yeah, he's James Bond, you see. It's
James Bond found another way of clearing his mask.
Suspension of disbelief, I think they call it, don't they?
It was. Brilliant film, brilliant diving in it. Must have been amazing to see the filming work going on. Yeah, as a film in total, it's a fairly run-of-the-mill James Bond,
I suppose you can't look at it from too much of a critical perspective, can you, in terms of a diver?
Really. Is it a bit of laugh,
you've just got to take it on the chin. It's just fictitious.
I don't know how many times I've seen that film now, but every time, it's a good watch. Is something to watch, and you think, okay, maybe that might not happen. But
I mean, Thunderball for me. I mean, when you go back to rewatch it, because it is one of those ones that you get shown when you're a little kid, and is one of those ones that does inspire, particularly for guys, especially without wanting to sound too sexist about it, does encourage you to get interested in scuba diving, and you see James Bond doing it. But when you look back at it now, in 2018, it is very much a timepiece, both in his attitudes and the techniques as well. When you watch the diving scenes in it, they're flying around at a rate of knots, going up and down, flutter kicking everywhere at 100 miles an hour, and it's amazing to watch the difference in technique compared to modern techniques.
What really surprised me as well is that they're filming in this really clear water off this island, Bahamas, white sands, and it's really clear. So you imagine 50 people all fighting, scrabbling, going up, coming down.
A bit of a whiteout, wouldn't it? Yeah.
You think that'd be
kicking it up,
kicking it up, but it wasn't at all. It was really clear.
Clever editing.
It was, I think.
We know all about that, don't we, on this podcast?
On several occasions I've had to do some clever editing and take a couple of words out here and there. That's really good. Yeah, so first of our two, big daddies of scuba and ocean related films, Thunderball, of course, inspired a whole generation of guys and girls to want to put on a scuba tank and be an adventurer. The second one is my one, and it has to be Jaws. It just has to be Jaws. Outside of it being ocean related, I think it's one of the best movies that's ever been made. It is just a work of genius, and it's aged really well, actually. I rewatched it again before we came in to record this, and it is just a fantastic movie. So it was made in 1975. It was actually released in June 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, at this stage in his career, this was only Spielberg's second film he'd made. The only one prior to this had been a kind of a low-budget release called Jewel, which you may or may not have seen, whereas a guy's been hounded by a truck going down the road.
Yes, film.
Okay, so he was relatively new to the game, and there was a lot riding on this film for Spielberg when he made it. And in fact, it was by accident in some respects. It was more of a success than Spielberg even planned for, and it became what was known as the first summer blockbuster. And the word blockbuster and summer blockbuster as a phrase is because of Jaws, to literally bust the block, where people were queued up around the block to see the film. Because, you've learned something already.
I've learned something today.
It's not just a song by Sweet.
So, Jaws literally caused the introduction of the phrase a summer blockbuster. It was made for $8 million, which back then was a lot of money. On its opening weekend, it almost recouped its money. In the film industry, they call that washing its face. You want to say something, Ian, don't you?
Well, I just thought, because Blockbuster, I always thought that had something to do with that guy Carolgees on on telly. We used to say, "Can we have another pea, please, Bob?"
Bob Carolgees.
Bob
Carolgees.
Bob Carolgees would spit the dog.
You're thinking of Bob Holders.
That's him. Him.
That is definitely staying in. That is absolute genius. Going back to Jaws, they made this enormous amount of money, and in fact, right now, as it stands worldwide, it's made something like $400 or $500 million.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
just over those years, it's accumulated, as it's gathered its legacy, as it's grown, as it's gone into it. Now, for those of you who've not seen the film, there's going to be spoilers in this, but I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis of what goes on in the film. I think most people can kind of guess where it's headed by the title. It centres around the activities on somewhere called Amity Island, which is this fictitious island which is supposed to be off the coast of Massachusetts in the States. And a shark begins to terrorise the residents as they're in the water, whether they're doing water activities, this kind of thing. And the opening scene, in fact, starts with a couple on a beach. They're going from a party and the girl goes in skinny dipping into the water. That famous music of John Williams starts, and she's pulled from one side to the other, screaming as she's bobbing on the surface. And what really makes this film is a couple of things. Firstly is the direction of the film. So Spielberg's really clever in a lot of respects in this film in how he changes certain scenes and sets them up. And also some of it is the realism. Now, I know that sounds strange talking about realism when there's a giant rubber shark they nicknamed Bruce, which was used for the special effects. But in fact, there's some realism behind the scenes that they kept in when they did the edit. So there's this opening scene where this girl's being pushed and pulled and screaming. In fact, they're real screams, because when they set this up in the making of the movie as a special effect, they had this girl tied with ropes, and she's being pushed and pulled via pulleys by these guys on the shore. And in doing so, she was being pulled under the water because they'd set it up wrong.
Really?
And she actually bust a rib when this was happening, as she's being pushed and pulled so violently to get the effect of her being swung around on the surface. So the screams and the please stop shouts that are in the film are for real.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
That's pretty
in the opening
disturbing.
scene.
Yeah.
So when you watch it, it is quite spine-chilling, even the opening scene when you come to watch it, before you even get into the movie. As the shark begins to terrorise the members of Amity Island, there are some tremendous scenes in it. And what Spielberg does as well is he kind of says all bets are off by breaking some movie rules. So as it gets to a little bit later on in the film, when there's people playing on the beach, he does something that no director of a family film would do. And the children and a dog gets killed early on, gets taken.
No.
And it's one of those moments where when you're watching a film, if you watch any kind of standard kind of horror film or action film, you kind of know the pecking order and that the hero's going to get away with it. And no one who's innocent like a child or an animal is going to be hurt. And Spielberg just wipes the floor with that early doors in this film and says, anyone's vulnerable here.
Yeah.
Anyone could be vulnerable to this. And that sort of continues as the rest of the film unfolds. It then generates into a third act where we have three main characters going out to hunt the shark down. So you have Roy Scheider, who plays the kind of seasick, water-shy police chief, who's on. You have Richard Dreyfuss, who's playing the oceanographer, the kind of scuba instructor type chap. And you have a sort of a stellar performance from Robert Shaw, who plays Captain Quint, who's this salty old sea dog. And so the whole third act of the film then morphs into a three-parter where they're trapped on this boat called the Orca, going out to kind of hunt down and find this shark, and they're forced into this claustrophobic environment. And I think that the last third of the movie is probably one of the best acted thirds of movie you'll find, period. Just the interaction between those three actors.
Start comparing scars and stuff like that.
Yeah, and in fact that for a lot of people is the movie's most famous scene. Now there's real tension between these three characters during this final third of the movie, and that tension was real. Robert Shaw was famously this grouchy kind of alcoholic at this stage in his career, and he was really off with Richard Dreyfuss and with Scheider when they were during filming. And so that bickering and that tension between them is real. They really didn't get on at all when they were filming, and that comes across. And it all kind of comes to a head in this particular scene where they're trying to outdo each other with scars and tall tales of what they've been up to. and saying, well, I got this from a thresher shark, and I got this from that, and this was when a moray bit through my wetsuit. And they're kind of comparing scars, and it escalates to the point where they talk about a mark on the skipper's arm, Captain Quint's arm, and it's where he's had a tattoo removed from the vessel called the USS Indianapolis.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and there's a pause, and the mood of the whole film changes when they realise that they're talking about the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, which was a real life event you can research, when they were delivering the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb.
Oh, yeah.
And the captain was on board the vessel that went down. 1,100 sailors went into the water, and by the time they were picked up by the rescue, which was a few days later, 311 came out and the sharks took the rest.
Oh, wow.
And there's this actually really spine-tingling monologue by Robert Shaw about what happened during that period to the sailors who were left in the water.
So it's referencing a true event.
It's referencing a true event.
Wow.
And it's an absolutely tremendous piece of acting, and I can't sort of commend it highly enough. But for most people, Jaws is a film about a shark, and of course there's all those action sequences. They're chasing it down, they're hunting it down, and spoiler alert, the shark is beaten at the end. I won't tell you how, just on the 1,000,000-to-1 shot that since 1975 you've not seen the movie.
I've not seen it all the way through.
You need to sit down and
It
watch
is a scary film.
I'll lend it to you on Blu-ray if you want.
Yeah,
it is one of the finest movies, period, I think, that's
It's
available.
that head that comes out of the boat I don't like.
Oh, is that bit, yeah.
Where the eye still attached.
Yeah, the eye still attached. The diving aspect of it is actually quite well done, and there is some realism within that as well. There's a scene that you were just talking about, Ian, when Richard Dreyfuss, as the kind of scuba instructor, the oceanographer, is researching what's happened to these victims, and he does a free dive off the back of the boat at night to when they find the wreckage of a local fisherman's boat, and he's free diving down in what looks like quite primitive gear. You know, he's got like jet fins on, like RK3 style ones, because they all wore them in the 70s, you know, the big heavy rubber things, and he's flapping around under the boat, and he gets a bit of a surprise, which we won't ruin for Louise, but when he's peering through parts of the hull and something pops out to greet him when he's down beneath the surface.
I'm not good with gore, and
So am I.
well, I've never watched it all the way through.
And there's another bit a bit closer to the end when they realise that the boat, the Orca is the name of the boat they're on, and the boat is starting to sink, but they've got a shark cage on board, and they're forced to make a decision. Are they going to just sit there on a sinking boat, or is one of them going to get in the shark cage and try and confront the shark? What are the options? And Richard Dreyfuss...
Fast forward that bit?
Fast forward a bit, yeah. I don't think they have that option. So they make the option to send Richard Dreyfuss into the cage. And for that bit, they actually do use full scuba gear, as it was in the 70s. So it's not like a BCD. It's not even an ABLJ, if for those you are old enough to know what one of those is. But he's got an alley tank on his back and a regulator. And there's a really nice touch when he's going to get into the cage, and he looks up at the other two guys, and he's about to put his mask on, and he says, I can't spit, I've got no spit. And he's so nervous he doesn't even have the saliva to spit into his mask before he gets into the water. And then he goes down. And actually the underwater scenes were conducted in Australia. They actually filmed with real sharks, with two people called Ron and Valerie Taylor, who were the David Attenboroughs of their time in shark research and filming out in Australia. And they filmed real footage for the movie of the underwater scenes of the great white circling the cage and the person in it. But what they did do, and I don't know if I should tell people this because it might take the edge off the film slightly, is when they filmed it, they actually got a small person, I'm trying to think of the politically correct,
I think that is correct.
the PC word for it, but a small person to be filmed within the cage to make the shark look even bigger when they had the filming sequences.
Right, okay.
But that aside, it is really, really well done. I think it's a great movie, and I think it stands the test of time.
It is a good film.
As an action movie, as a movie with tension in,
Yeah.
and it is really well acted. One thing I would say is don't watch any of the other ones. Jaws, the original one, is fantastic. The others aren't worth even being on VHS tape.
So how many more were there in the franchise then?
Oh, there were, I can't remember,
5,
5 more.
Right.
All
There
of
was
which,
a 3D version, wasn't there?
oh, and they were all terrible. But the first one, absolute classic.
Yeah.
So if you've got time off over Christmas, if you haven't seen it, or even if you have, I would highly recommend rewatching it. In fact, I might watch it again tonight. Who knows?
I only
No,
saw
too scary.
snippets of it. I remember when I was really young, and if it was on in the front room, like I would always just go up to my room or do something in the dining room, and my brother would be sat there like, "Oh, it's okay to come in now. It's not a gory bit. It's not a scary bit," and it would be just as a scary or gory bit. And I'd walk in and he'd go, "Not really."
I'd be peering at it from behind the sofa.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I used to do.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, as well as that music, John Williams, the famous composer, it's just two notes.
Yeah.
Now,
It's
that
so effective.
music and that way that music was used was part by necessity, because the mechanical shark they'd built kept breaking down, so they were forced to use more music and not reveal the shark until later in the movie, which in fact makes it better. It just builds the tension, and that music, that cello sound, becomes the shark.
Yeah.
You know, but
I remember the Jaws music and the Doctor Who music when I was little.
Yeah.
Used to terrify me. Yeah.
But anyway, I could, as you could probably tell, I'm a fan of the film. I could wax lyrical about it for another hour. But
Would
I
you
think,
say it's one of your favourite films ever?
for sure.
Yeah.
It's up there in my top 5 films, full stop. I think it's just
There's
a
not
great
many
movie.
films out there which do pay good respect to the art of diving, because I think for cinematic quality, I suppose they have to glance over what's realistic in diving.
Oh yeah, because
to
you've
make
got to.
the films work,
Yeah,
don't they?
yeah.
I remember some other film where, and you just look at it and you go, well, that wouldn't actually work. So I suppose, there's not many films, and Jaws is one of them films.
So it's a bit
really
more credible.
good, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is an action film, and the guy who wrote it, Peter Benchley, did get a little bit of a backlash for kind of demonising sharks.
That was what I was going to say next, actually.
Because
because
and the tagline for the movie was, you'll be scared to get back in the water and this kind of thing. But for me, although there was obviously the film itself as a child was frightening to watch. I was probably about 10 or 12 when I saw it for the first time, but it piqued an interest in me in the oceans that never went away and led me to do what I did. So I think it's, I think you can take that with a pinch of salt. In terms of how you
it's open to
view that.
Interpretation, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
I think we've got 2 good movies for Christmas.
Yep.
2 of the classics to rewatch.
Yep.
We've looked at charities. We've looked at news.
Yep.
We're pretty much ready to roll in part 2. For those of you hanging on for part 2, and please do. We're going to have the wonderful Samantha on to talk about marine conservation and some of her adventures. So I think, unless you guys have got anything to add.
No, I think that's pretty
all.
much.
So
Yeah.
I think the musical was it
Should we
clarinet,
have him on for one
saxophone
last
playing
go,
there?
just to sound us out?
So being booted out of the window in. You know that.
Since that's Christmas, we'll end it there.
I think we'll let the little bear play us out.
Play us
shall we?
out, yeah.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Well, we do hope you have a good Christmas
Have a
anyway.
great Christmas.
Have a great Christmas.
Thank you for listening to Scuba Confidential. We really appreciate you tuning in today. We'd like to clarify that we're in no way affiliated with any agency or organisation. All opinions expressed during this podcast are our own. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at ScubaConfident1, Instagram and Facebook at Scuba Confidential, and if you'd like to support us via Patreon, go to patreon.com/Scuba Confidential. Any contribution is really appreciated. Additionally, if you have any suggestions for topics or discussions, just let us know at scubaconfidential@gmail.com. Many thanks to Plunkett Music for the groovy tunes, and we'll catch up next time. Until then, keep diving.